Make sure that you have a national master service agreement with a restoration contractor. Doesn't have to be me. There's some other companies out there that are good. I'd rather it be me, but I recommend 100% starting there. Make sure you have that relationship. Make sure you got that one throat to choke.
This episode of the Student Housing Insight Podcast is sponsored by the Guarantors. If you're an operator, you know the importance of a parental guarantor. Having parental guarantors legitimizes your rent roll. But have you ever tried collecting from a parental guarantor after their student skips out or they have to be evicted? How quickly were you able to recoup lost rent from that parental guarantor? The truth is, if things get to a point where a student skips out or is evicted for non-payment, the parental guarantor doesn't care about their credit score. There may have been a job loss or even a divorce. No background check is going to tell you which parent is about to leave their spouse or has an employer who is about to downsize. So how do you eliminate that risk? I mean, reducing risk is like the top 3 responsibilities of a property manager. Well, the Guarantor's rent coverage product does just that. Not only will it ensure that you can quickly recoup lost rent, but it will also increase your prospect to lease conversion rate because you're not waiting on a parent to provide their information. This product makes so much sense for student housing assets, and that's exactly why I'm now advising my asset management clients to forget about parental guarantors and talk to the Guarantors. You can find more information about their rent coverage product as well as other risk reduction products they provide to the student housing industry by going to theguarantors.com/student. You can also find the link in the show notes. Well, what's up, everyone, and welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. I'm also the CEO of Student Housing Insight. We are a platform for off-campus student housing professionals to network, share ideas, as well as data. You can find out more about our platform at studenthousinginsight.com. And don't worry, if you're driving, if you're running, all of the links that we're going to mention in today's podcast will all be in the show notes. So don't feel like you got to pull over and write that down really quick. In addition to this podcast, we also host the industry's monthly webinar for the United States called Shop Talk. Each month, we provide legislative and policy updates that are impacting our industry. Shop Talk also provides a monthly overview of pre-leasing data on a national and a regional basis, along with a panel of operators who provide their on-the-ground observations of what's happening from a pre-leasing standpoint. And we typically provide some type of topic of the month as well. So a lot of great information. And if you are involved with the operations of student housing in the U.S., regardless if it's on the vendor side or if you work with a property management company or if you're an owner-operator, you should definitely register to receive our monthly invites for Shop Talk. You can register to receive those as well as review our previous Shop Talks. They're all stored right there on the Shop Talk website, which is shoptalk.info. Again, that's shoptalk.info. And again, we'll provide those links in the show notes. So today's title for this podcast episode is Winter is Coming. So I don't know where you're at in the country or when you're listening to this, but we are past Thanksgiving. I probably should have done this maybe a few weeks ago. Here in South Carolina, we're already dipping into the upper 20s at night. And it just happens to be that I haven't had heat in my home for 2 weeks because, they've replaced 2 different parts on it. And now we're back to a control board that's got to be replaced. So a lot of cold nights in my home, to say the least. But anyway, so what are we talking about today with Winter is Coming? We're talking about preparing for the cold temperatures, and of course, that mixed with the student environment where folks are going to be going on winter break here in just a couple of weeks. I don't know if you've been caught in the situation. I'll tell you a little bit of a personal story for myself. I had a property, I'll just say in a Texas market. I don't want to get specific because it's student housing, and as soon as I say it, someone will pick up on it and realize that there's a particular property that's had a significant amount of water damage, and maybe they red flag it or something. So I'm just going to say, in the Texas market, probably about a decade ago, there was a really deep freeze that kind of came out of nowhere with maybe just 24 hours of warning. And we had staff that had all left, and needless to say, that staff got called back out to the property just a couple days before Christmas, because we had building after building after building that had pipes, specifically had pipes related to the sprinkler system that had frozen, and it was not something that we were planning on spending our Christmas vacation doing. So anyway, I've got two guests today that are just perfect for discussing this. We're going to break it down from both a proactive and a reactive, because look, as proactive as you can be to try to prevent some of these leaks and other things that happen during the winter, the truth is there's still stuff that's going to end up happening. Things are going to fall through the cracks. So we've got someone here to also talk about how to be prepared from a reactive standpoint, if that makes sense. So anyway, joining me today is Jonathan and Lance. Jonathan, Lance, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on. We talked about this last week was Thanksgiving. Lance, you sent me an email and said, hey, we just need to get the word out because this is happening. And, as much as I like taking care of everybody when they've got a disaster, we really want to make sure that we're helping people in advance so that, they're hopefully they won't have the disaster. And if they do, they know what steps they need to take in order to quickly react. So this was kind of your idea. And I said, you know what, Lance, we should have done that weeks ago. Let's go ahead and get it out as soon as we can. So we're sitting here the Monday before LeaseCon, TurnCon coming up in Charlotte next week. I expect this will probably go out maybe Thursday or Friday. So hopefully the folks that are headed into Charlotte to attend the conference will be listening to the podcast on the way down, and they'll think about things that they didn't think about earlier, and then they'll thank you at LeaseCon, TurnCon for mentioning it to them. So Lance, thanks again for bringing that up and making sure that we had some content going out to help our audience for sure. But for folks that don't know you, Lance, which you've been involved with the student housing industry, for a while, so you may be a name that everybody recognizes. Jonathan and his company is probably a little less known. Certainly very well known in the Greek world for fraternities and sororities. And we'll talk a little bit about that, how we met, Jonathan. But
sure.
Lance, let's start with you. Kind of give us a background on yourself and your company.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Wes. My name's Lance Lemoine, and I'm with the Lemoine Disaster Services, and we provide restoration relief for nationwide. So that includes water restoration, fire, rebuild, repairs, roofing, gutters, space heaters, water, fuel, everything that you could think of that you may need in an emergency situation, we have it. And that's what we do. I've been doing this 20 years. Thank you for having me in the Student Housing Insight. Student housing has been my favorite market to work in so far. And so I'm happy to share today our knowledge on being proactive or reactive to winter freezing.
Well, great. Yeah, I can't wait to get into it. And Jonathan, a little bit of background for the folks in the audience. You and I were introduced this past year because we both have some friends in common in the fraternity, sorority, management world. And
correct.
They said, hey, you guys are both going to be at this conference, later in the summer. You guys should certainly meet. And I was,
and we did, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. I was really blown away by the product. I want to make sure that that we're talking about it. I'll say up front for probably a lot of facility owners and operators that are in the Southeast and the Southwest. You may not have a big need for for Jonathan's product, but I can tell you the folks that are managing older buildings, and especially in the Midwest and the Northeast, this is, I don't know how they don't live without it, because it's something that makes just a ton of sense. And so with that being said, tell us about Salamander.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for teeing this up, and thanks for having me on the pod. I'm really excited. I'm a listener, and now I'm excited to be on this side of the audio. So
welcome.
So my name is Jonathan Epstein, and I am a co-founder of the Salamander Reservoir, and it is a solution that alerts to pipe freeze symptoms so that you don't get pipe freeze failure. My big mantra is that pipe freeze is preventable, and I am going to do my best to spread that gospel to anybody who worries about pipe freeze, especially in these winter months.
Yeah, let me, I want to bring your website up and just kind of go through a couple of things with the product. Give me just a second to share my screen.
Sure. Well, while you're doing that, I'll tell you that the website is getsalamander.com.
Yeah, here it is, salamanderreservoir.com, but you said getsalamander.com, correct?
Correct, because people were having trouble spelling the word reservoir. So if you type in Get Salamander, it goes right there. It's so much easier. I don't know why I didn't start with that, but that's how it is.
Absolutely. So, I want to go through a little bit. You've got a background in, property management. So I'm
Correct.
Assuming that this was something that you came up with and developed after a lot of pain and frustration.
We got snake bit with pipe freeze once, and it wasn't pipe freeze that led us to come up with this. It was actually, we were overpaying for a utility room, for electric in a utility room. We got this bill for a sprinkler room that was like $3,000, and we thought, what is going on? And we get out there and we find out that the thermostat had fried out, and the heat was just chugging and chugging and chugging. And so we open up the door. It's like the jungles of Hanoi. It's like 95 degrees. The water was more at risk for boiling than it was for freezing. And my partner said, "Why are we heating when the air gets cold? You got to heat when the water gets cold. Can you do can you do that?" And I said, "Yeah, we can hotwire a thermostat. That's pretty easy. Can you design the box?" And he said, "Yeah, I could do that." And we put our heads together and we came up with, a couple different prototypes, and here we are. We have a solution for the wet side. We have a solution for the dry side, because we came up with this. My background is not life safety. And we said, hey, this is what we're doing. We're protecting your wet fire sprinkler systems. And the industry said, oh, that's great, but the problem is in the dry side. Oh, okay. Well, what's the problem on the dry side? So we've, over the past 10 years, we've been really refining this offering and found that the two most vulnerable and most popular is wet and dry. So we've got a solution for both wet and dry fire sprinkler systems.
Gotcha. And I'm just scrolling through here. I'm on the dry side now. Now, explain a little bit what we're looking at here.
Okay. So let me tell you. So not all places have dry fire sprinkler systems. Although there are a lot actually in the South in Texas. I've got more of these units in Texas than I have in Massachusetts. So go figure on that. We'll touch about the geographic anomalies in a little bit, I'm sure. But dry fire sprinkler systems are designed for areas where you get freezing temperatures. Areas like parking garages, maybe attics, kind of these commercial freezers, stuff like that. You've probably seen them before. And basically a dry fire sprinkler system has its water in a protected heated area, like a mechanical room. And then there's an airlock. There's a valve that pushes down from air pressure, and it keeps the rest of the system pressurized with that air. So that's why it's called dry. Right. The problem is that you're injecting a lot of air into the system because it loses a little bit based upon the temperatures and the pressures. So by keep injecting fresh air, you're actually getting condensation that happens inside the pipes.
Gotcha.
That condensation runs down into this black cylindrical unit called a drum drip. And that's designed specifically to catch your condensation accumulation. So there's a ball valve on the top that's open so that it can collect the water. The drum actually is designed to receive, and the ball valve on the bottom is shut off. So when that collects with water, it's not a problem. And freezing air temperatures is not a problem. But when you get those two factors together, when you get freezing and water, that's the problem. There are very specific instructions about how to drain your drum drips regularly. I actually have them on my website. That is part of the maintenance obligation that owners and managers should be familiar with so as not to depressurize the system. You've got to lock off the top valve to keep the pressure north of that. Then you release the bottom valve to discharge the water. You got to close the bottom and slowly open back up the top so that you're at no point are the two valves open, which would cause that flapper valve, that dry pipe valve, to release to discharge the water through the rest of the system.
Right. Okay.
So the salamander that's there's a little probe, and that is telling you when you've got water in the bottom of your drum drip.
Gotcha.
So you might have 2 ounces of water
right here that we're
down.
My mouse is currently over.
Go a little bit more down. Right there. That's it. So when you get that much water, which is about 2 ounces of water, it's going to send you an alert. You've got water in the drum drip. You might have 2 gallons of water and you might have 2 ounces of water. But on a 0-degree day, that thing is going to burst within an hour. So it's time to get down there and purge it, get the water out of that system.
So it's really just reading the conditions and saying, hey, you've potentially got a problem. And
correct.
I've got the screenshot here now of, the messages that are sent. And
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So
if you get that alert on July 1st, you could probably let it ride. But if you get that alert on Christmas Eve, somebody better put down the Christmas turkey, get down there and purge that thing so you can avoid a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, wet systems. And I think this is a little bit more, an issue where both of these issues are something that's going to be pretty expensive, but parking decks versus with this, you're talking about inside a residential unit, not only is there going to be damage, but you're also going to have residents that are going to be misplaced.
Huge.
Displaced. So
huge. And even before then, if your system is iced up, you're putting your people at risk. You don't have a functioning fire protection system. That's the biggest risk of all, the discharge and the remediation. And Lance can get you all recovered from that. But, if you're putting people at risk, nobody wants to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is really common in, kind of older buildings where you see those pipes kind of get to the end of the building where it's close to a door that's constantly being open and closed. And let's face it, in student housing, it often gets propped up.
Correct.
Yeah, all of a sudden you've got, much cooler temperature on one end of the building that, your thermostat may be on the other end. Yep. And you have no idea it's about to freeze.
That's right. And usually you find out afterward, hey, you got water coming out of the door. Is that supposed to be like that? Oh no, it's a problem. Our mantra is pipes freeze when water freezes. That's why our solution is monitoring your water temperature internally. And so when your water temp gets to be 48 degrees, maybe it's not a problem. Maybe somebody left a window open or a thermostat isn't working or a heater is offline. It's not a big deal. You can go and check it out. It's like having your check engine light go off. It doesn't mean to panic immediately. But it's better to know at 48 and 47 and 46 versus getting the call about, we got icicles and we got a water fountain coming down. So that's what we're doing based upon the water temperature.
Now you've got kind of 3 steps here that could happen. So there's the response, someone coming out and checking on it, but then you can also connect this to,
local on-site
heating source, right?
Correct. So that's an option. The first thing is you got to know what's going on. And so we're letting you know in those vulnerable areas when your water temp is at 48 or less. And for your listeners, north of the border up in Canada, that's about 9 degrees. So you got to know, because NFPA mandates that owners of facilities that are fire sprinkler, they need to keep the water above 44 degrees at all times. Okay, so you've got time. You can react, but it's a persistent notification that will also let you know, if you decide not to integrate with heating, that your water temp is at 40, at 38, at 37, at 36. So you still have that heads up. If you integrate with on-site heating, we can kick the heat on when your water temp is at 48 degrees, and then we can shut the heat off when your water is at 50 degrees. This is a data-driven approach. This isn't superstitious of, oh man, I feel like it's going to be cold, let's go and crank the heater up. That's the background that I'm used to. Listen, it's almost 2025. Let's use some data here.
Yeah. Now, I know you and I have both kind of been working, together to work with the insurance companies to see, hey, is this something that, can provide some type of, some type of reduction. And everybody I know that you've talked to and a few that I've talked to are like, yeah, absolutely. We just don't know how to calculate that.
That's right. It's a little unfortunate, but there seems to be a bit of an agree to agree that they think there should be something, that it's not a nothing. And some of the companies that I have been in talks with said, because they understand it intimately before, their bigger carriers or their reinsurance people, that they can increase some coverage or maybe help subsidize the cost of Salamander or help on some respect. But it is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Now, would you consider this, kind of an Internet of Things, type of solution? Or is this, because you're sending out text messages. So, or is this more of a, what do they have to have in place to make sure that this works? Is Wi-Fi something that's essential, or?
That's a great question. We are predominantly our own isolated network, our own IoT network. So we don't rely on customer Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or any of that stuff. These are commercial sensors that have a secure link to the gateway. There's a gateway that's like the brains of the operation. The gateway has its own cell service, so it's dispatching to the cloud to send those texts and to propagate the back end. All you need to do is plug in the gateway into a standard receptacle like your phone charger would, and then you can put our sensors, you can put our salamanders anywhere you want, and they're addressable, so you don't get any of the trouble in zone 4 nonsense. It can say that it's at the front door of this house in this location, and this is what the temperature is, so that when you get those alerts, you can act fast and respond intelligently.
Well, Jonathan, it's a fantastic product. I'm not going to get into pricing. You shared the pricing with me, and all I'll say is it's way cheaper than the alternative, and this is not something that's going to dent your NOI at all. And it ought to be a crime not to have it if you've got a sprinkler system.
Amen, brother. Amen.
And the alternative would be paying Lance. So we'll talk about the reactive part in just a second, but let's kind of finish with the proactive really quick. I want to take your website off here.
And like you were saying, protecting your fire sprinkler systems is really just one part of your winter maintenance. There are some other things that you should be doing.
Let's talk about that, because you provided Lance and I with this checklist that you have for property managers, and we'll make this available as well. We'll make some kind of link, and so folks that want to get a hold of this. But you've broken it into kind of 4 areas: life safety, mechanical, roof and exterior, and then plumbing. So let's start with life safety. Go through a few things here, and I'm sure there's probably some stories that maybe Lance and I have got.
One of my favorite stories. So I'll lead with number two under visual inspection under life safety, which is visual inspection of all systems. And I've been to a lot of trade shows this year about fraternal housing, and our friend Woody Ratterman said it best: walk around your property, know what you've got.
Show up and look at the things you're supposed to be managing.
It's difficult. It's not hard. That's a huge thing. Look around, see, do you have any spots where you're getting water? Do you have any spots where people go, man, this room is so cold and there's a sprinkler head in there?
Yeah.
Pay attention to things like that. Use your service professionals. It's so important that you go through and get your fire sprinklers inspected each year. Rely on their expertise. What should I be looking for? What do I need to do in this room? What do I need to do to make sure that I don't have an issue? I think those are the first two most important things on the life safety checklist side.
Yeah, make sure you get your backflows checked as well. I've learned a recent lesson on that.
and one of the other things is have a manual. Create a procedure. You've got to have that list of all of the things, because you can't. Property management is too intense to just have it in your head. It runs really well with policies and procedures and manuals and contact usernames and contact names and phone numbers and pictures. There's never been a better time. You can take 1 million pictures with your phone.
Yeah, and there's some great inspection apps that you can set up, send a reminder. The property management systems that we're all using these days have a lot of that integrated in it. Mm-hmm. But, even if you're on something that's, not very advanced, as far as a property management system, there's plenty of, free apps or next to free apps that, you can, not only does it give you the checklist and you can store pictures and everything, but it'll also send you a reminder saying it's due. So no reason not to do that.
And also rely on the strength of your team. If you're managing properties, you've got to collect that data, in case there's any transition. You've got to know what's going on in the different houses or the different facilities that you're overseeing. So I think it's important to find a way that gets shared. Even small things like don't forget to replace your batteries and the smoke detectors and your emergency exit fixtures. You could do that annually, and that's kind of a little step that goes a long way.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and get down to mechanical, because you just talked about batteries for smoke detectors, but also I'm going to say batteries, and then just functionality of the thermostats, because a lot of newer companies or companies or properties that have gone through a recent renovation, they've added smart thermostats and have been able to offer that to as a additional feature to the residents. I'm finding a lot of these, the Wi-Fi components and the thermostats are starting to go bad within a couple of years. And I'm not talking about, some cheap thing that you get that's supposed to be a smart thermostat. Some of the nicest, Nest type of thermostats that are, $200, $300 a thermostat are, malfunctioning 6 months, 8 months, 2 years into being installed. And it's just, whatever that little chip is that controls the Wi-Fi just completely, goes out. So, what happens, so student is away and they can't log in to, check the thermostat, or they're not getting any kind of warning that, the thermostat, isn't able to keep up. So, again, I think it's perfect time to, when you're replacing the batteries and filters and all that in a unit, check and make sure that the Wi-Fi is actually working as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And not only Wi-Fi, but, make sure that your device firmware gets updated. If it's a camera or if it's a thermostat or if it's, all of this IoT stuff, it needs to be updated, because sometimes they can prevent or they can be, security risks. Nobody likes to think about it, but it's kind of up to you as the guy or girl who's putting them in to be responsible for what you've got. And, I guess I should add a new thing on this checklist about, firmware and devices, just like you're updating your phone software. You got to update the device firmware.
Yeah. So let's move on to roof and exterior. And I know Lance is got a comment that he wants to make about Texas when it comes to what is just underneath the roof. But let's go through that.
So some of the easy things that you can do, just look at your roof, get out there, get a drone on it, just look at it. Are your seams, are your flashing, is all that stuff okay? Because, sometimes a big gust of wind can just rip this thing open like a tin can. So you just want to make sure that all of your spots, including gutters and downspouts, you want to make sure that those are all running free and clear like they're supposed to. It doesn't take too much, but man, you'll be happy you did it.
Yeah, and most roof companies will come out and do that for free. So
yeah. Again, that's rely on your roof. I'm not asking anybody to be a roof expert, but call up your roofing guy or your roofing contractor and say, what do I got to do here? It's kind of a weird spot. I'm getting water in the window, or what should we be doing?
So here's one. Being in South Carolina, I don't know a whole lot about. So hoping you can help me with this. Install snow stakes. I don't even know what a snow stake is. And reflectors for light poles, bollards, and other uprights.
Yeah. So snow stakes are they're like giant like fiberglass pencils, and they're orange or yellow, and you put them like at your entrances and stuff. You just tack them in with a hammer. But it lets your
snow piles up, and
lets them know where the entrances are, because if it snows a foot and they get out there, they don't know where the driveway is. So that helps to designate, this is the driveway, this is where it starts to curve, and this is where the parking stops are. So stop.
That's where the fire hydrant's at. And
that's right. So gotcha. Snow stakes are designed to protect all of your stuff. That picture it under a blanket of snow. What would you need to see? You want to stake that out.
Gotcha. So I want to move to plumbing, but in between the roof and the plumbing, there's attic space. And Lance, you've seen the problem over and over again. What happens in the attic space? I'll let you explain that in case there's someone that may be new to this and don't understand what the danger is.
Yes. So what I've seen a lot in Texas, especially in Texas, Louisiana, the southern states, they don't insulate the decking, right? They don't insulate the decking, which is what's underneath the roof in the attic space. They just have insulation above the drywall and the ceiling, and then the sprinkler pipe.
And let me add this from a prior painful experience. Sometimes they will do it in the residential buildings, but they won't do it in the clubhouse,
right,
or in the leasing center, or right. If you've got an attached model. Yeah. Very painful experience during leasing season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think we had at least 30 different complexes last year. This is last year. It just if it's below 32 degrees or 30 degrees for 12 hours straight, things break and then leaks happen, especially in the attic space. A lot of the clients have wanted us to come in after the fact and spray foam and insulate the behind the decking to insulate, because it'll insulate the attic, and it'll make it more like a cooler. It'll insulate the attic space to where the pipe will no longer freeze. The heat from underneath the drywall will rise and help keep it warm in the attic. So preventative maintenance, like you guys are talking about, 100% should insulate the attics when they have the time.
Here's an interesting war story from the field that I heard about, is that this poor guy, he was at a bank. They did everything right. They insulated the pipe. There was a sprinkler riser that came up in the corner of a building, and it froze and it burst. I don't know, 100,000 gallons of water over Christmas break or something like that. And he went back and he found out that they actually put the insulation on the interior wall side. Right. And not the exterior wall side. So it actually made that pipe colder because they put the jacket on the wrong way. So this pipe wasn't getting hot. It was actually being prevented from being warmed up. Right. So make sure you know which end is up. Make sure you think about which way you're insulating so that you're doing you're doing it right. Sometimes it's best to have a a second set of eyes or a property management professional to just make sure you're doing it right.
Somebody may be listening to this, come around December 15th or something and say, hey, I need to, or even in January, and they're like, oh, there's a cold spill coming, and let me stick my head up in the attic and kind of see what's going on. I would strongly suggest, if you find yourself in that situation and you see that, those pipes are not insulated and you don't have the time to do it, alert, your local fire department or whatever. Get the system turned off and go on fire watch, because as far as from an expense standpoint, that's going to be much more beneficial than going through and risking everything that it's going to that you're going to end up having to displace people.
I want to make sure that people know that fire watch is a very specific protocol. Yes. That should not be entered into lightly. That has to be entered into with the previous approval, with the understanding and approval from the local fire marshal, the code enforcement people, a sprinkler like that is that's not just something that you do by yourself. You got to
no, 100%.
They'll get into that.
Get in touch with the fire department and make them aware of it, and they'll walk you through the steps. And I think typically, they understand that situation and would much rather have have to put some guys that are working some extra shifts or whatever to provide that fire watch than having to know that residents are going to end up being displaced.
And I think one of the other important things that people should know about is that everybody is here for your benefit. So whoever is listening, we're all here for your benefit. If it's your local fire department, they want to see you succeed. If it's Wes bringing you information, they want to see you succeed. All of this information is really for your benefit. So never be embarrassed or ashamed about asking a sprinkler contractor, a restoration contractor, what do I do here? Everybody loves to help and share that knowledge. This community is great for that. This forum is great for that. So never feel like, oh, I don't know if I should ask. That's why we're doing these things, and everybody is here for your success.
Well, Jonathan, let's get over to the or Lance, let's move over to you and get into the reactive type of stuff. And so there ends up being a leak. Maybe it ends up being on a disastrous level, and we've got to call a little bit more in than the maintenance staff and have to go through a restoration process. What are some things that people can set up in advance that is going to make that process a lot more smooth, and will allow you to, in your company and other companies like it, be able to provide a more streamlined service to them?
So what we try to sell to our clients is a master service agreement, MSAs. And the reason we do that is multiple reasons, but the first one is that you are on the priority list, with the other companies that we have MSAs with to respond, because when there is a disaster, there's thousands of buildings usually affected, or it might be statewide, might be multiple states affected. And like we talked about before, there'll be 1,000 restoration companies out there going place to place. Some companies even want money up front. Some companies won't even respond without certain criteria is met. And it'll leave the property managers and the properties in disarray with having to try to figure it out for themselves and causing delays and maybe more damage, right? Because that water goes from the top down.
That master services agreement is very specific to the portfolio and properties themselves. You guys, it's not just like, hey, here's an agreement and here are the prices that we're going to abide by. This is actually kind of a negotiation process of a process where you kind of go through and analyze, hey, where some places that you're susceptible, to have some issues or whatever. And, let's talk about how we're going to respond to those and and here's the pricing. Now we know the pricing. It's not something that you're looking for or trying to negotiate when you're right in the middle of water falling from your ceilings.
That's right. Yeah. When if you're in that situation, it is the worst situation to be in, because you don't know are you paying fairly? Are you going to get reimbursed by the insurance? Are they going to pay for it? You don't know these things. And the MSA allows us to be your advocate. It's a pre-negotiated rate, just like you said, positioned for that portfolio. And it's also an agreement that, we're going to respond. We don't need to wait for a work authorization. We don't have to send you documents or insurances first and all the other things that contractors usually have to send in to perform work services. Once the MSA is signed, we respond to you guys immediately, no questions asked.
Or if someone wants a work authorization, it also kind of outlines, hey, this is where the authorization has to come from. So that in advance. It's not something that you're waiting around to hear from somebody on.
Right, correct. Yeah, there's an SOP that we follow, that we build based on what the client wants. If it's Wes's properties or Jonathan's properties, it's going to be, this is going to be our POC, our point of contact. We don't respond without these three things. And then it might be things like, instead of going in there, like a lot of restoration companies will go in there and they'll just start cutting walls or they'll start tearing stuff out. We can put SOPs in there where we only pull baseboard and we only set drying equipment. And we don't go any further than that until we've reached out and talked to the property and gone through the proper channels. So it's a protection for the properties as well. We manage these losses nationwide for that reason. It's a blanket coverage, of pricing and management across the country for you. So you're not, California, I'm getting double the rates over here that I am in Florida.
I think a key thing that you started to hit on with that is, you're kind of, laying out, who's going to be called and who's going to be doing the calling. But it's something we kind of talked about in the prelim of this was a lot of folks don't take the time, they go through the process of putting the MSA in place, but then they don't ever educate their staff on, hey, we have this in place. And all of a sudden, they're Johnny on the spot, when an accident happens and they're calling everybody in the phone book. I know there's not phone books anymore, but just go with me for a second. But they're calling everybody through the yellow pages, and all all of this time there was something that was already set up that was pre-negotiated that could have kept them from wasting so much time.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I've worked for other companies over my 20-year career that they get the MSA signed, and the restoration companies are just as guilty as the properties from not educating everyone down the food chain, right? They make the agreement with their executive food chain and MSA is signed, and then no one talks to each other until there's a loss. What we do here at Lemoine is we make sure we have, at least annually or twice a year meetings or Zoom calls with the regional vice president that zone, their regional managers, their property managers, and usually their maintenance staff on that call. So we can help educate. Here's how you call. Here's the workflow. Here's when you want to call us, right? We don't want to call us because someone spilled a cup of water on the floor. But, there's a lot of 6-unit and 3-unit losses that properties think that aren't insurance claims, and they can just handle it in-house, and then mold grows and bad things happen, and then we're called out after the fact. So educating is such a crucial thing. And we're even happy to educate the staff, maintenance staff, how to handle issues and the right equipment to have to handle it internally. We understand that some of those things are going to happen. Properties need to try to save some of that cost and try to do things as much in-house as they can. And there's also a point where you don't want to top your maintenance staff full-time handling these small losses, right? Or medium-sized losses. So education's crucial.
For those disasters that end up, you end up having to make a property manager ends up having to file an insurance claim. Kind of walk us through what you guys do, in order to make sure that everything's documented and to get that process rolling, sooner rather than later.
Right. A couple of things with that. The first thing is there's a lot of companies, back to MSA, provide a rate sheet and they say, hey, this is my cost. This is how it's going to be. You bill your insurance carrier. We don't have a contract with your insurance carrier. That's what a lot of them do, right? Here's our pricing and this is our bill. What we do is Part of that's correct, but the other half of it is we're an advocate for you. So we're going to make sure you file the claim, make sure that you tag us in every email with the risk and the adjusters and the insurance carriers. And the reason for that is that there's transparency across the board. We can then let the insurance company know every day they're on the daily field report. They're getting updated as we're progressing, as we find more damage, as we are starting to dry it out. So they know what's going on every step of the way. And if there's an issue, someone can say, hey, wait, let's talk about that. Why are we doing that? Instead of the property being on the hook for, $100,000 that wasn't covered by the insurance. But that step one is to call us. We'll come out, assess, contain the area and environment, control the environment. And then we'll educate and say, hey, look, we think this ROM or rough order magnitude is $120,000. It's not worth you making a claim, right? So we'll help give that advisement too as well. We don't want you making a claim just to make a claim. We want to make sure that it's necessary.
I think that's super important. And to hear what you said about being an advocate, because anytime somebody calls a property restoration company, it is not the best day of their life. I mean, it is, things are falling apart. You got water where it's not supposed to be. You got, ceiling tiles crashing. It's a horrible day. And you really need somebody on your side. And so, like we said before about relying on your team of experts, it's good to have those relationships and those conversations beforehand, because when things go south and when Murphy's Law raises its ugly head, you got to be prepared for that, because there's a lot of people who are relying on you as a manager or an owner or something to make it right as quickly as possible. And often that's very difficult without professional assistance from a disaster recovery expert.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Lance, anything else on, kind of being proactive about the reactive that you would suggest to our listeners?
Make sure that you have a national master service agreement with a restoration contractor. Doesn't have to be me. There's some other companies out there that are good. I'd rather it be me, but I recommend 100% starting there. Make sure you have that relationship. Make sure you got that one throat to choke, as they call it, right? And and that way you can funnel that down and make sure you funnel it down through your regional VPs and your maintenance staff and your facilities and everyone involved on every property, because I can't tell you how many times I'm still dealing with it every day where a property in Auburn doesn't know what to do, but the property in North Carolina knows what to do with the same company, and they don't know the processes because maybe they changed maintenance staff or whatever the case may be. So they're calling someone local because they're worried about timeline. They want it fast results. They want it now. But they're also setting that property up for an issue, right? Is that going to be paid for? Are they charging too much? Are they doing what's best for the property? Are they doing what's best for them? So
perfect. Well, guys, thanks so much for being quick to this. I sent you guys an email, I think, on Tuesday. I was out of the office Wednesday, and of course, the rest of the weekend. And appreciate you guys being able to quickly on the fly help put this together and be ready for today. And I think it's there's definitely some folks out there that have learned something new and are going to be better for it, and hopefully save their property a lot of money for it as well. I'm going to put all of your contact information and everything in the show notes, so they can email you and find your websites and all that good stuff. And both of you guys are pretty active on LinkedIn, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
So definitely go follow these guys on LinkedIn. And Lance, I will see you next week at LeaseCon TurnCon. And Jonathan,
I'll see you in 25 at some point. I know our paths are going to cross again soon.
And I honestly hope it's not in Pennsylvania during the winter.
All right. Well, let's make it a plan to have some sunshine next time.
You're welcome to come to South Carolina, but I stay away from that mess as much as I can.
Sounds good.
That's right.
Sounds good.
Thanks for having me, Wes. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. All right.